because Southeast Asia, or in fact globally, everywhere is very different regulations-wise, which also means in Singapore, if there's these 5 types of legal entities, it may not be the same in those markets. Number one, yeah. And which also, I will also say that for many Singaporean companies, I will say we are typically very spoiled. I would like to use the term we are spoiled because things, the government here makes it so easy to do business. Everything's very transparent, everything's very digital. But once you start going to especially different markets of Southeast Asia, you will start to realize it's a whole world altogether.
We are excited to kick off our second episode of the podcast today, and our topic is going to be on demystifying foreign ownership. And with us today, we're joined by Eric. I'd love for maybe to kick things off for you to just go ahead and introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you for having me. I'm Eric here. I'm the Chief BD Officer for Incal Group. So essentially, Incal Group, we are a Singapore headquartered corporate services provider with presence in 8 markets within the Asia Pacific. So essentially, when we tell our clients, what do? I always say we provide the boring but necessary corporate services for your business to prosper. So...
No, but you do a little bit more than BD, right? I remember I read your profile. You carry 3 functions.
I carry 3 functions.
Very big functions. What else do you do?
I'm not paid 3 times, but so essentially,
we can thank the company on this, right?
So yes, I have 3 functions with the company. All the sales and consultants in all 8 markets have the functional reporting into me. Unfortunately or fortunately, I also head up the marketing function. So all the marketing teams in all the 8 markets also functionally report into me. And lastly, I also head up corporate partnerships. So yeah, I'm not paid 3 times, but I hope I am.
HR, okay? Right.
You want to hire me?
Yes. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So maybe to kick things off, there's a whole lot of different ways that companies could expand when they're thinking about feeling ready for regional expansion. And maybe the first thing that comes to mind for people is setting up an entity, but it doesn't have to be that way necessarily. So could you talk us through maybe some of the strategies that companies could deploy in order to set themselves up for these regional expansion?
Sure. So I guess whenever a Singapore company, for example, wants to do international expansion, I always ask the first question, what is the objective? Right? Why do you need to be in that country? Is there a specific purpose, or you're just looking to go there and do sales and marketing? So depending on the objective of the business leader, then we will suggest, yes, in this case, you need a legal entity because you are going to look to hire a big team to service the local market. Right? So definitely you'll need a legal entity on your own to perform certain local services for your own clients. There are also perspectives whereby you do not need a legal entity. For example, you're just sending people in regularly to meet your clients for client meetings, for example, which is very common. Yeah, in such cases, you probably won't need a legal entity. Yeah, but there are also instances whereby companies where they might have a specific project that's time-bound, 1-2 years project, where they probably need to have people on the ground for that temporary period of time. So in instances like this, I would say it's again a two-way, right? You can choose to go to set up a subsidiary legal entity, hire these people, provide the service. Once it's done, you get out, wind it down. I would say there are methods of going in, hiring these people or sending these people in to perform such project works. So for example, we do have a client in the maritime engineering. I won't name the name of the company.
A lot of big names today, but all cannot name.
Yeah. I don't want to get sued after that. But essentially what they are looking to do is they are performing certain maritime engineering works, essentially to build ships or vessels in a particular country like Indonesia, where they have to send in about 100 people of engineers, technicians, project managers, etc. to be on the ground. And because the project is estimated to be about 2 years, so it also means that they were saying, hey, I wouldn't want to set up a legal entity just for this one project for 2 years and then wind it out thereafter. They start to worry about, can I terminate these people, etc. Right? So many of these worries start.
Which is a fair worry, right?
It is. It is. In certain markets like Indonesia, it's probably pro-employee. So it also means that for such a client of ours, right, our solution to them is, hey, why not use an employee on record service, whereby a service provider like us hire these 100 people, we outsource them back to you to perform the project for these 2 years. After this, we will take care of all necessary needs for tax, eventual termination, etc. contracts with the employees. So with that note, like I say, there are a few methods of going into a new market, depending again on the main objective.
Yeah. And how clear do you find, companies are on that main objective? And it may sound like a funny question, but I guess I pose it because a lot of times, especially in markets like this, where there's just the reality is there's so much uncertainty, you could have your game plan, but then a few months or a quarter into the year realize that actually things look very differently. So how do you find that balance between, okay, I have enough conviction that now is the right time to start thinking about expansion versus, being too loose with it and going in before ready?
No, Tristan, while your question it may be funny to some, I'm not surprised because I hear this many times, whereby business leaders are thinking about market. They think of it that I think it works for my business, but they're not sure whether it does. Yeah. So I guess while we are revenue generating business, if the client wants to do it in the Philippines, I'm happy to do it in the Philippines for the client. But at the end, as a good advisor, we'll ask back. Have you done your market research, right? Do you have a business case for your product, services in that market? Yeah. So in that sense, I would say our advice back to the client is, have you done your on-the-ground research? Have you engaged market research firms locally to help you find a market, for example? Have you done enough travel to the market? Yeah. So I think with a combination of all this, it helps the business leader start to realize after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it takes for them to form a business case. Then they decide, okay, now I have the conviction to go in. But of course, I also met business leaders, or especially I would say more in the SME startup zone, where they are more, in a Singaporean term, more gung-ho.
More chung. Let's go first, right?
Right. They say, you know what? I'm very sure this market works for me, for my business. I will go in first. Yeah. So I've seen people like this. I've seen companies like this. I've seen companies like this also prosper because they dare to make a move very fast and start, making the moves locally. So it can work either way. I wouldn't say, a brave entrepreneur is wrong not to do enough research before going in, but I may be wrong, yeah? So I've also seen people that done a lot of research going in and then they still fail. Yeah. So I think business is all about luck and opportunities, I guess.
Yeah. Could you kind of help us understand a little bit, like, what are the different options? Because just now you did say, like, you don't always need to set up a legal entity. Yeah. You could always use someone like an intermediary like yourself, and what are the other structures that, if someone's just testing out, right? Okay, I have a matured business in Singapore, or I lead a big function here in the MNE, and then I want to test out somewhere, maybe in the Philippines or Indonesia. I don't want to commit to these things, like, what other options do I have when I looking at setting up?
Well, I guess the theme of my session today is about business objective, right? Okay, but that aside.
Yes.
Because Southeast Asia, or in fact globally, everywhere is very different regulations-wise, which also means in Singapore, if there's these 5 types of legal entities, it may not be the same in those markets. Number one, yeah. And I will also say that for many Singaporean companies, I will say we are typically very spoiled. I would like to use the term we are spoiled because things, the government here makes it so easy to do business. Everything's very transparent, everything's very digital. But once you start going to especially different markets of Southeast Asia, you will start to realize it's a whole world altogether. Okay. So my advice to business owners is speak to people like
enough. Don't keep plugging. But what about, let's say, the freelancing type of situation? Like, maybe I just want to hire 2 or 3 people on the ground, and I just give them a freelance contract direct to my Singapore entity, right? Like, what are the risks involved, and how should I think about this thing?
I think in such freelancing or freelancer contracts, cross-border, for example, which is again very regular, I guess for the Singapore company, which is the employer, I would say the risk is relatively low because you're entering into a freelancing contract. You will have your typical termination clause, etc., yeah. But in other sense, if you think of it from the freelancer side, right, he just want to do the job for you based on the scope of work that should be clearly defined in the contract. And the risk for you is that the freelancers can go anytime. You probably can't find a person thereafter. Yeah. So I would say it's about understanding who is the person you're getting connected with. Is it by way of a warm referral? There's past track record before. But yes, freelancing is very typical, especially where companies want to find I would say digital marketeers, to do certain one specific of the work, or they want to find somebody who just want to perform a particular HR advisory job in that market. They might not have their own HR manager. They might want a freelancer to give them the consultancy at the start. So many perspectives like this.
Yeah. And what are some common pitfalls or I guess blind spots that companies have, sometimes stepped into and thinking about, especially when you're talking about labor laws and so forth? Even if you're, hiring somebody remotely, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, the law of the land that I live in is what applies here, but maybe that's not the case in certain arrangements and so forth. So what are some of the bigger, I guess, pitfalls or blind spots that organizations have stepped into, and maybe how do they mitigate and avoid doing that?
Sure. I guess especially for SMEs in Singapore, again, we are spoiled by the government here. It's so easy to do file for my taxes, do my compliances. I guess for companies in terms of potential pitfalls, other than labor, right? I would say a lot will be in terms of the other perspectives of regulations locally. What do your company there or subsidiary there needs to do on a yearly, quarterly, monthly basis in terms of reporting to the government? Singapore government or any company reports for tax once a year, but there are certain markets in Southeast Asia where you probably need to do it on a monthly, quarterly basis. There are certain countries like Indonesia, Philippines, where it's the job of the employer that we hold personal tax of the employee and file it to the government.
Oh.
Yeah?
So the employer have to file for
correct, on behalf of them.
Income tax.
Yes, that's right. There are also circumstances where many business leaders ignore is, in terms of the tax perspective, what is the tax implication of doing a business there? Do I need to report this as revenue or not? Yeah. There are also perspectives. I can probably list 101 pitfalls.
Yeah, please give us.
But in terms of the main ones, I guess in terms of legal contracts, where you're using a local entity to sign a contract with a local vendor or customer, has it been vetted by the local legal counsel before? Yeah, I think in the terms of doing business worldwide, there's never a cookie cutter. What works in Singapore may not work in that country. Yeah. So I guess in terms of this, people need to be very clear. I think the last main point, right, linking to my industry again, is in Singapore, there's an audit exemption for Singapore companies. So it meets certain sizes. You qualify as a small company, you do not need to audit your financials, but you just file unaudited financial statements. But there are countries where you definitely need to audit your financials. Okay. Yeah, so there's no choice. You have to do it. You have to file it, prepare audited financials before filing it to regulators. For example, Malaysia. So in circumstances like this, you have to understand the local regime very well. Okay. Through an advisor or through your local staff, GM, for example, to advise the parent company what needs to be done. And then you budget your costs from there. Yeah.
Cost is important.
Correct.
But all these business costs that are relatively hidden when you at first think of doing it, right? But then they kind of amount.
Actually, Reggie, I wouldn't say they're hidden costs. I would say because they don't understand enough when they go in, it's unexpected cost. I wouldn't use the word hidden.
It's not that
the government outside Singapore is not good.
Yes.
I would say it's unexpected cost.
Okay. Like doing an audited statement, all these is very pricey.
Yeah.
Okay. But maybe I want to understand a little bit on, because you're talking about laws and taxes, right? And it's an interesting space.
Laws, taxes, accounts.
It's all linked, right? So let's say we decide to set up a subsidiary, right, in wherever jurisdiction that we're going with. So essentially, we are bound by the local law.
Correct.
The local entity is bound by the local law and parameters, right? But it's a subsidiary to the parent company, right? So are there any, like, more ambiguous spaces around this, because my HQ jurisdiction is here. I set an entity in Indonesia, and maybe I sign contracts with my Indonesian entity. And if I want to litigate, the whole thing, right? So are there certain grounds that you think our people should listen and understand?
I mean, I'm not a qualified lawyer here, but as long as a Singapore company has a legal entity set up in that country, right? Be it is 100% owned by the Singapore company or individually owned by the founder, for example, that company, say incorporated in Vietnam, will need to play by Vietnamese law. Very clear cut. No grey lines around it. Yeah, you don't say I'm a US Singapore company. I play by only US Singapore law. No. Yeah, so you have to play by the laws there. So the second perspective of legal will be when you sign again local contracts with your local clients in that market, or your supply contracts with your suppliers in the local market, or vendors. So you can have a way or seek legal counsel opinion to where you want the contract in terms of the governing law to be by, number one. And number two, when things happen to with both parties, right, depending who is a plaintiff or defendant, for both parties, which court of law they have to go to litigate or to arbitrate. Yeah. So if all these are clearly defined with the help of a legal advisor in that market, I think it will help a Singapore company navigate the local waters a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah, at least legal-wise, they are more protected.
Fair.
Yeah.
So just for clarity's sake, essentially, I may have a Vietnamese entity. I sign with local Vietnamese entity for contract, but within my contract, I can state that I want to arbitrate and litigate in Singapore.
Because to me, a legal contract is a willing buyer,
of course.
willing buyer, willing seller. Yeah. So if both parties agree, nothing says that you can't.
Okay. So then indirectly, we are bound by the Singapore law system now.
I will still say no, because the legal entity still need to play by local laws. Yeah.
Okay. So are there certain more clearly ambiguous parts of a structure like that?
I'm just giving general guidance.
Yes.
In terms of how you should think about this.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever you structure not just the legal entity, but the contracts that you sign locally.
Yeah. Fair. I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
What does iterating a game plan look like? So I imagine that for some of these commercial leaders that feel ready to expand, part of the concern would be, what if I do this and then I find out I'm wrong? And and maybe I'm partial to this question because in my prior life, prior to joining Glints, I was on the investment banking side, and for us, updating our outlook just meant updating our financial spreadsheet. But for an operator, it's a lot more complex like that because of the implications that go into it. So I'm wondering, for organizations that have decided and started the expansion, but then realize, actually, maybe we should have done that a little bit differently. What does iterating the game plan look like, and how can organizations maintain a bit of flexibility so that they're protecting themselves if they do need to make a pivot?
I think this is business management 101. What can be done or what cannot be done there. But I guess to my clients, right, I will always tell them that a business model or business plan that works for you in, say, Singapore may not work for you the same way in a market outside of Singapore. So in that sense, you cannot adopt a cookie cutter concept to wherever you expand to.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's not just the accounts, it's not just the tax laws, right? It's not just how you structure HR policies. I guess at the end of the day, the business must always be prepared to change course if they find that something's not working. Yeah. Even after extensive market research, some things will still go wrong. That's just the fact of life of doing business.
Yeah.
So it means that a company, big or small, must be nimble enough to shift directions, whatever it needs to be, depending again on the situation of the business. So I would say again, there's no cookie cutter of how you want to do it. HQ in Singapore can give a guidance, right? This is how I run my HR policy. I want to do some things very similar or near 100% the same in that country. Is it possible? Based on local nuances, culture, the type of people that you hire, for example. So in that sense, I would say, to all business owners out there, you have to be very nimble. You have to learn a lot.
Yeah, you got to relearn whatever you thought works here.
Correct.
Probably does not work elsewhere.
Let's Talk See Business is brought to you by Glints Talent Hub. We understand that building a thriving business is immensely challenging. It is especially intense for business leaders like yourself. Hence, we want to journey with you. Glints Talent Hub is the leading all-in-one solution for all your talent needs. Our mission is to pair you with the right talent anywhere across Southeast Asia that fits the unique needs of your business. From there, we handle all your talent management needs. We're talking talent sourcing, hiring, EOR, PEO, talent development. We have a track record of 2x faster team building and up to 70% cost savings. If you want to expand in Southeast Asia, we are your partners. Connect with us, link in the description below.
Yeah. And you and your team, you operate 8 markets, right? All across the region. It's you're only not in Thailand, right?
In Southeast Asia, yeah.
In Southeast Asia, right? So you're around, right? So maybe you can be a little bit more tangible when it comes to sharing your experiences of what worked totally well in Singapore for your business. So we're done with the corporate structure thing. Now it's you as a business operator, right? You run this and you set up this thing, it worked in Singapore. And then as you kind of like try in other markets, it didn't work, you chug it out, Do you have some of these kind of things to share with us?
Sure. I mean, since I run the commercial side of the business, I guess depending on which market and in that market, who are we targeting? I think the target audience or the target clients are very important for any businesses. Do you only deal with local domestic clientele, for example? Or do you deal with a mix of foreign and local clientele? When I say foreign means, in my business means a foreign company, like a Singapore company, goes into a market like Indonesia, setting a subsidiary. So that subsidiary in Indonesia is foreign owned. So our classify as foreign owned, yeah? So in that perspective, right, there are markets of Incorp where we are built up for foreign companies coming in. There are certain markets where I have a good mix, like Singapore. I have a good mix of local and foreign clients, yeah? There are certain markets where I'm 90% domestic. That means I only cater my services to locally owned companies, or owned by local nationals and not foreigners going in. Yeah. So depending on the nuances of this, I'll have to structure the business strategy a little bit different. How I reach out to potential clients. Yeah. I mean, in my business, not never about door knocking. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Then it's really in terms of, do I need to spend more money on digital marketing? Do I need to build that presence very well, thought leadership content? Do I have to, for example, start going through partnership models, right? Whereby I go to intermediaries, I go to other consultants that will refer business back to me. Yeah. So based on that knowledge that we have on the business objective that we have, then that's how I build up the sales teams in the different markets, and working very closely with my country CEOs in those markets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess in any business, big or small, is probably startups is harder. It's usually a 1-2 man show at the start. You do everything on your own. Yeah. But once you become more established and more well funded as a company, then you start to have resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have the resources to hire a country CEO, CFO, head BD, etc., etc. And that's where you get a lot more help. And start the planning can be a lot more wholesome.
Of course.
Yeah.
Is there a more memorable experience for you operating in all these markets? Like, give us something that's specific to a particular country that's very memorable for you.
The local culture. I think because I'm in 8 different markets, that's very different from Singapore. Yeah. So in a market where people listens to you very well, everything they will say yes. I can't name the country, but there is countries, people in the country that generally respect the hierarchy. They will say yes to everything, but maybe they are not convinced to do the job.
I think Pui Lim said that you can listen to the episode 1. You got to match, right? Like which one is
probably stand my ground and not say it. But there are certain markets where the employees, because of the local culture, they tend to challenge you more. Right? They will voice out their opinion that, Eric, this doesn't work here. Yeah. So I guess because I travel every month, not a fun thing to do, but I go to all markets very regularly. So it means it's always a good thing to immerse yourself in their local culture and understand how they think and work, so that you can structure again your business strategy or model locally, how you want to pass down a certain message. Yeah. So I think that's the fun part of a company where you have multi-country presence, where you get to start to learn different cultures and to change the Singaporean way of thinking.
What is something that you definitely have to change from a Singaporean way of thinking? Like when you go out there, drop this.
I guess I think Singaporeans are very prideful. We're very prideful.
We think Singapore is the best, right? Is it?
Yeah. Okay. I think a lot of Singaporeans think that way. We're the best. My English is damn the best, because English is first language here. So I guess once you go to the different other markets, you have to put your pride down, because you're not just, to them, you're just a colleague going into their market, working together. You're not somebody from a higher up nationality. Yeah. So I think for me, over this 8 years with Incorp, that's how I learned a lot like this, actually.
Nice.
So in building these plans, when organizations do start to get the resources where they can deploy, where have you found the most effective, from an organization's perspective, the most effective investments to make in terms of really setting themselves up for success in these expansions? Be it a position or some other structural thing that the organization is doing.
Oh, there's many aspects. I guess in the people business like ours, I think the people is obviously important, the human capital, which also means the investments I have to make in terms of what officers I want to choose. Do I want to choose a grade C, grade B, or grade A in a central CBD area in those markets? I think that's important for a business. For other businesses whereby they think that the office image is not important, they can work in a co-working space, for example. I guess though, these are certain things that they have to consider in that. I guess the other resources where it's very important, again, for a subsidiary there's a revenue generating entity that you want to set up, right? Which I would say most businesses will want to target that. So it also means that, do you want to put more resources into hiring the salespeople, or you want to put more resources into hiring the operations people, the delivery teams, yeah? So then you have to toy with the idea, right? It's a chicken and egg. I want to deliver a good service after winning a sale, but I need sales first to deliver a good service. So it's always that chicken and egg problem, right? Where you want to put your resources into. Yeah.
How would you do it today if you can do it all over again? Knowing what you know, let's choose a market, Indonesia. Today,
Okay.
you start from fresh. You have this business. It's a corporate service. You go in, you start from scratch. How would you do this?
I will go 50-50, sales and ops.
Okay.
And I will outsource certain things out.
Like what? What would you outsource?
So, I mean, for companies out there, you can outsource your accounting, tax, HR,
Everything.
payroll, for example, in initial stages as you're building up revenue. So once you have that traction, then you start hiring these in-house resources to handle it in-house. Yeah. But I would say you first need the revenue first, so that you have a business case, and then you have the delivery team to support the sales guys for work that's brought in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's always important. But there are also instances where companies whereby they go into the market not because they want to be revenue generating.
Yeah.
They are probably looking to set up a shared service center, which is very common. I mean, there's many iterations of that. But a SSC or shared service center is mainly set up to support group officers all around the world. So they support in-house delivery services, again, like the HR, payroll, AP, AR, tech development, digital marketing. So in such business cases or objective in going to a new market, where setting up SSC in Indonesia or Philippines or even Vietnam nowadays for tech guys is very common. So they are not looking at revenue generating, right? They are looking at internal revenue generating from group officers and hiring the talent there. So in that sense, office may not be the most important. They don't need to be in a grade A. They can be in somewhere in a suburb, for example.
Fair. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the partnership side of things, since you talk a little bit about it, right? Because not everybody wants to go in and operate a team, operate on the ground, have a plan rolling. Some people are just very happy where they are, and but they want more business, so they think like, okay, how about we sign local partnerships? How about we enter into distribution arrangement? Or those sort of things that limited activity from your perspective going down, and you try to see whether your local partner can push the market, right? So going into such a structure, what do you have for our listeners? Any thoughts?
I guess, again, the business objective for your own products and services, it's such a model where you don't need people on the ground, distribution network, local partnership to help resell your products and services. If this works very well for your business without incurring the capex, the investments into a new market, then go for it. If you, in your business, you definitely have a product or service where you need somebody to face the client. You have no way, but you need to have somebody to face the client locally, then yes, that it will be something that you definitely need legal entity, hire your own people, go in yourself.
Yeah, that sounds like a boardroom discussion that you had. It's like, let me hire this person. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, can you share with us a little
What's
bit?
the budget? What's the
Yeah. How do you convince management, right? Because sometimes some of our listeners are like senior business leaders, but they're not there all the way up there yet, right? So then they got to convince a business case up all the way up, right?
Yep.
So how do you kind of help them build some case on convincing people that we still need to hire local?
I guess the doing the groundwork is very important. Right? So we do have, for example, I have a Chinese listed pharma company looking to come into Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is very big, right? 10 over countries. So that particular client, they actually spend about 6 to 9 months to do the groundwork. They send the head legal, head BD, head finance or CFO to all these markets. Each and every one speak to the local government agencies, like our EDB, for example, right? In the perspective of Singapore. They send people there to talk to advisors, service providers like us, they send those people down to speak to potential clients or existing clients that also operates in the market. So in this 6 to 9 months period, they start to form that business plan that covers again where I going to earn the money, which is BD, how I going to deliver, which is the ops, how am I going to account for those money that came in or money that goes out, which is the finance, and then they build together a business case. Yeah. So I think that is always very important, depending how big you're coming to the market.
Also very expensive.
And very expensive.
Yeah, but relative to the capital that you're preparing to put in, right?
Yes.
So for a structure like that, of course, it's nothing.
I mean, for the larger companies like that particular example, they have the resources to do this, and they have the time to do it.
Yeah.
But I also seen clients where they do not have the luxury of time. Yeah, say, Eric, I have this project, I have these 10 customers waiting for me, I have letter of intent, I need to go in now. Yeah, so in that sense, they rush it in. Yeah, so I would say I see a mix of all. Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's only one way of how you're going to navigate a market.
But there are some best practices.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And how do you advise clients on basically the pace? Because, there is that tension between if they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, we're ready to go.
I will solve that.
You're not going to stop them.
We gotta go.
Yes.
But sometimes, they can, especially if they're doing it for the first time, they may think they're ready to go and they're really not. So what do those difficult conversations look like where you need to push back, basically?
Sure.
How do those conversations go?
I think it's a difficult conversation because I'm a for-profit business, so there is a conflict of interest. I don't deny.
Thanks for recognizing that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm truthful. Right? I'm transparent. We have a revenue-generating company.
Okay. Enough.
But I guess for conversations like this, a client that's mentally clear, but the plan is not clear. Right? So I guess it's about how we guide the person or the business leader to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then, of course, the finance
is there something that is a bit more prominent that you always have to advise people on that they never think of?
I will go back to the same two words.
Business objectives.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, elaborating on business objectives. So once a business objective is very clear, then it's not through our own partnership as a advisor or consultant, a service provider. I can say, okay, in this market, I have these few ecosystem partners that I know that may suit you to speak to right now. So that before you execute any certain project, you at least understand, do your business have a play in the local ecosystem? For example, yeah. So depending how many people that business leader speaks to, business leaders, advisors, governments of that country, chambers of commerce, associations, right? I think it's important to spend all this time with them. And this is how we always advise our client. Have you spent enough time to understand this? Yeah. Yeah.
And let's assume a client is very clear on the business objective, and we drill down a layer below that into what their executional plan actually is. I'm wondering, where do you typically see the biggest disconnect? Is it thinking about, is it a misconception of what the talent in that market would look like? Is it a misconception in terms of the amount of resources that they'll need in terms of actually setting up for success, the amount of, leadership they'll need to, boots on the ground that they'll need to put? Where is from an executional perspective, the disconnect that you oftentimes find?
I think I've seen many SMEs, especially because SMEs typically they're tight on resources.
Of course,
they don't have the wealth of the
exactly, and they need it to work, right?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest, I would say, gap that we have seen very often, they really underestimated. Yes, you're right. How easy to find their talent locally, right? They would think, I'm going into Philippines. Philippines has 200 over million population. It's easy to hire. It's easy to get people to come to my office every day and work for me. But once they get on the ground, they realize Philippines is made up of hundreds of islands. Right? The talent may be in the city of Clark, does not want to work in Manila, for example. Yeah. So I think once they get on the ground, they start to get in touch with local culture. That's where they start to see the reality versus their original thinking.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I would say, when it comes to doing business, right? Again, they try the gap, as I mentioned earlier on, is they try to use a cookie cutter concept. It worked well for me in Singapore. It made me prosper. I would adopt a similar strategy in this market, a new market like this. I've also seen times where it doesn't work because the market simply is not ready for the type of the marketing strategy, business development strategy of doing business. So in that sense, and another point, right? I think it's also linked to BD again, or people, is that there are Singapore companies that think that I set up something in Vietnam, I'll send 2 of my Singapore guys to hit the business.
Yeah.
If they are successful in Singapore for me, they will be successful there. But they start to realize that, hey, there's one sort of a language barrier, and 2, because they're used to doing business in the Singaporean way, or the westernized way, because we are very westernized. In Vietnam, they start to realize that, hey, the local people there don't buy the same way of interactions or engagement. So usually I always tell the client, you have to hire somebody locally who understands local culture of the people. It makes it easier when it comes to interactions with your clients, vendors, business partners.
And I'd love to maybe underscore a theme, because it's something that you touched on in the conversation in the last episode with Bai Lam. It was touched on as well, and just in terms of the importance of really finding an advisor in making these decisions. And it's one of those things, I've spent most of my career on the commercial side before moving into a talent role. And I find that when people make that commercial to talent switch, there's this conception that the talent side is just easy to do. And then the reality of it is that there's a whole lot of complexity when you're dealing with people, which is why you kind of need a bridge, so to say.
You're speaking from experience.
It's a very different world. I'm sensitive to the topic. But no, what I'd love to maybe talk about is how expensive it is for an organization when they do this wrong, because I think that could help maybe, emphasize the point of why it's so important to have the right partner when you're looking to make this decision, by really looking at, what does it look like when an organization does this wrong. So of course, not any of your clients, but maybe they did it wrong the first time, and then they realize, okay, I need to do it right the second time, and you're advising them a second time around. What does it really look like, and how costly is it to them when they do it wrong?
I think many business owners, great question. It's again a very wide topic, but I guess for business leaders, if they get it wrong, they are thinking about 2 things, right? I exit the market totally, or I continue to tow it through. They are
both sounds very sad.
They have to tow it through, yeah. So for the first instance, or the first segment of people where they say, okay, I need to exit the market, it's not working out for me. Many business leaders don't realize that even to exit the market, there is also cost involved. To wind down a legal entity, you will need to spend time and effort and money. To wind down a company, you need to do your last tax reporting, last accounts. You need to terminate employees, for example. So that is, to me, a new cost that comes out, even though you're exiting the market. The second perspective for clients or companies where they want to tow it through, they want to continue, right? Loss making, no problem. I'll continue to try another year. There are many like this. So then it's about whether they're adaptive enough to switch direction, whether they're adaptive enough to try a new business strategy that helps and brings in new revenue for them. So again, I would say it's very people driven, but it's also very business driven, to making whether each choice or option is correct or wrong.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to add that, maybe from a Singaporean perspective, a lot of Singaporeans don't even realize the idea of time is very different in other parts of the region, right? Like when I operate in KL, people drive an hour plus to kind of meet you. They're not expecting a half an hour coffee. They're expecting a 3-hour hangout, right?
Again, local nuances.
It's very different. Okay, you take MRT 2 stops. Okay, let's just do a half an hour chat. Okay, bye. Then you handshake on it, right? But if people are going to drive an hour and a half, no half an hour meeting, right? So and that affects the frequency of transaction. It affects your expectation, how you manage time and people. And all these are very local, and I think a lot of Singaporean companies do need to have that context.
Yeah, because in Singapore, we would think that traveling from Tuas to Changi, for example, east to west or west to east, 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Although I will still not do it, right? But I get
we
it.
hate to do it, we think it's very long. But in the market, outside of Singapore, like Indonesia, Vietnam, it's so big.
Yeah.
To them, 1-2 hours of travel is fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
They're totally fine with
part
that.
and parcel.
Yeah, it's part and parcel. So it's not easy.
Okay, fair. Maybe last question, right? Just because you operate all these market, maybe just give me name drop which is the most underestimated market to operate in.
Underestimated.
Yeah. Like from a Singaporean perspective, a typical Singapore business leader that is operating very well here, and then they think like, okay, we're gonna go here, but it's the most underestimated. They don't understand the thing.
Singapore and Malaysia, pretty similar.
Okay.
Culture-wise, demographics-wise, I'll say it's pretty similar for Singapore and Malaysians to work together, right? And for something that works in Singapore, probably it will work in Malaysia and vice versa, because again, the culture is different, similar. But once you get outside of these two countries, anywhere you go in Southeast Asia, are damn difficult, are damn complex. When it comes to, again, in my field, the legal regulations, how you're going to do compliances, monthly, quarterly, annually, how you're going to file your taxes. Do you need 10 people to help you prepare your taxes, or you need one person, for example? I would say any other markets outside of Singapore and Malaysia, in a way, are highly complex, highly different.
Fair.
So somebody that goes in, I wouldn't say needs to be a brave heart, but needs to be mentally prepared. They will learn a lot of new things.
Of course. Okay, that's good, right?
I hope I don't scare people.
No, exactly.
Going out. Hey, I'm in the business of internationalization.
Yeah, suddenly everybody go back, hey, I think very hard. Let us not expand. We'll just stay here. We're doing well. Right.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, to your point, Reggie, Singapore is just 5 million population.
Yeah.
No matter how big or small your business is, there's only that limit you can grow to.
Yeah.
So that means, in the true calling to the Singapore government or Enterprise Singapore, a Singapore business got to go out. If not, your revenue will just stay at this level.
Sure, yeah. Enterprise Singapore, you want to sponsor, you let us know, okay?
Yeah.
Right. So,
right.
So yeah.
Sponsor Reggie.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you for
right? Let's move into Q&A. Right. Any particular questions from anyone on the floor?
Singapore companies is the usual countries: Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. These three, I would say, are very common for Singapore companies to expand to, right? Because Singaporeans or Singapore companies feel very close to. They travel frequently to those markets. They think they understand the market. Yeah. But in terms of interest, I would say these three high on the agenda.
Is there a sector breakdown? Like what type of businesses have a general?
I would say all types, to be very honest. It's really all types of businesses. But of course, there are certain businesses in a particular market where the local players are very strong. You wouldn't want to go into the market.
Like what?
Yeah.
Are there certain things? You don't need a name drop, but like where the dominant...
I would say since a lot of the startups are in the tech space, and tech is very wide, right? So in terms of tech, for an e-commerce player, for example, an up-and-coming e-commerce player in Singapore who fairly successful, want to go to different markets and do the same way, cookie cutter, they start to realize that there are many competitors locally, big and small. Small ones usually they haven't heard of them, because everything is in local language.
But once you go in, right?
Then they realize, oh man, they are competing with me. They are charging half of my price. So I guess in a simple to understand business model like e-commerce, the market research got to be done.
Yeah. Fair.
So, for them to have a fair chance of fighting with the local players.
Fair. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Any other questions?
No particular reason. Because first, income is not in Thailand. Yeah, number one. So I don't have a lot more knowledge of Thailand versus the rest of the markets where I'm in. So I'm not deliberately avoiding Thailand. I would say for Singapore companies, Thailand is also, I would say, a common interest as well. Because again, Singaporeans as individual consumers, travelers in the market, they feel close to the market. But I would say for the way Thais do business, they tend to want to work with Thai-speaking people. They tend to want to work with Thai companies. Yeah. So for foreign company going in, you must have a very clear strategy. To go in, and you have to hire locals.
Yeah. And
there is no way a Singaporean can go there and do it on his own.
And sometimes it's not even about how much capex you're gonna put in.
Yeah, it's not about the money.
Time in the market. Yes. You need to sit there long enough. They see you every other Chinese New Year. By the third year, they'll sign with you. Right. So there's a lot of these type of
probably yes.
Yeah, slower things. That's quite interesting. Okay, fair. Any other questions?
I guess for many Singaporean-owned companies, when I say Singaporean-owned, meaning a Singapore company that has a minimum of 30% Singaporean shareholding. Yeah. they can take advantage of a few grants. For example, the MRA grant or the market readiness grant, awareness grant, to go out to a new market and conduct businesses. So it's not just about setting a legal entity in the market and expanding the market formally. You can take advantage of the grant to do, for example, trade shows. You want to take part in trade exhibitions, right? The government is willing to part fund some parts of the cost to that new market. If you're a company that's looking to have to drive innovation, setups, something that's tech, improve a certain product cycle, etc., that you want to do in between Singapore and a new market, right? I think the government, there's also certain grants like this that a Singapore company can take advantage of. So, on this thing, Preline is very interesting because in Singapore, about half of my clients are foreign companies coming in. So whenever they ask, Eric, do I have a grant to take advantage of in Singapore? I say, sorry, no.
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 You don't qualify.
Yeah, you don't qualify. Yeah. So you got you're on your own.
Yeah.
So I guess it's how why Enterprise Singapore wants to do this, right? Because essentially there's a Singapore government.
Yeah.
Their first code of call or main objective is to help Singaporean companies or Singapore-owned companies to prosper. So that's why they designed the grants program around this. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last things? Nobody. It's a wrap.
Thank you, guys.